going from a company like we did, which was hard, and transforming that into a new company is actually harder than doing a startup. And the first thing you have to do is bring your customers along.
Not everyone makes the news, but behind every growth-driving experience, product, and transformation are experts who shape the outcome. Welcome to Behind the Growth, a podcast for digital leaders and those aspiring to become one. Each episode features a candid conversation with a remarkable individual. Join us as we focus on their struggles, wins, and lessons learned you won't find anywhere else. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Behind the Growth, where we delve into the journeys of those leading the charge in their respective industries. I'm your host, Imran Mia. Today, we're thrilled to have with us a senior executive from Calix, a company that's redefining the networking landscape. Calix has undergone a profound transformation from a networking equipment provider to a trailblazer in the cloud services arena. Our guest, Matt, joined Calix in 2017 and has been instrumental in this evolution. Matt, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. Let's dive into your story, the shifts in the industry, and the insights you've gained from your tenure at Calix. To get started, maybe could you share a bit about your background and what led you to join Calix in 2017?
Great. So I graduated from college about 30 years ago, right? And then I had the pleasure of spending time at some pretty big brands. Merck Pharmaceuticals, then Harvard Business School. Then I spent about 12 years at IBM, and then I was at Dun & Bradstreet. And, these companies were amazing companies. They were great brands, but they also were, pretty well-established companies, right? Their average age was over 100 years old. Their employees numbered in the tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. And to be frank, I reached a point where I just wanted a different value proposition. And, what I was looking for was something that was more entrepreneurial, right? And I wanted the opportunity to go to a place where I could just have a lot more impact on the organization, right? You can do great things as a cog in some of these companies, but you are a cog in a very, very large machine. And so I was looking for, again, a smaller company where you could also have a much more rapid pace of change. I joke that I can do in 3 weeks at Calix what took me 3 years at a place like IBM, right? So that was a big one. The second thing is that, I learned early on that companies, are either taking markets or making markets, right? So they're either going into an established market with a better mousetrap, like say Salesforce in CRM, and you could argue that they basically took that market, or you can go make a market, which is, completely transform something and make it a different eventuality in terms of what the market is. And I looked at Calix and the vision to really transform broadband and make it a very different industry. And that was exciting. And then the last part is I was looking for a sense of purpose, right? And the thing that's interesting about Calix is while Calix, we serve broadband service providers of all sizes, from as big as Verizon down to a few hundred subscribers in a small town. Almost half of our customers are primarily not profit focused. That means there are municipalities, electric cooperatives, telephone cooperatives, other organizations that are trying to build a broadband business with their primary driver is to help their citizens and members live a better life. And, I like to say that our purpose is to help transform society one community at a time. And, frankly, we don't do it. We help our customers do that. And so when I looked at Calix, I felt like, closing the digital divide and doing it with organizations that obviously want to be successful and profitable, but also have a real community-driven vision, that was exciting to me. So those were sort of three of the things that really attracted to me at Calix at the time that I joined 7 years ago.
That's phenomenal. Thanks for sharing that. And I absolutely love the fact I was listening to Michael's interview from a few months ago, and he talked about having a purpose in the company and how Calix empowers its customers to have that impact, particularly around where children are involved. So, yes. So I'm absolutely very impressed with the, profitability. Absolutely, when you're a publicly traded company, But when you add purpose to it, it gives you that additional motivation to get up and go and do something
Oh,
good.
yeah, and it was interesting. So Daniel Pink, who you may be familiar with, he actually came to one of our conferences, and he was so moved that he actually came to our leadership team and then came back off of sabbatical, right? And to redo the conference. And it was interesting because when he was at our leadership team meeting, he said, the first thing he said was essentially, you guys are so lucky because most companies have to figure out how to make up a purpose. You've got one, right? It's a really meaningful purpose, and you don't realize how lucky you are that that's kind of built into your business model, which is
Absolutely.
really important.
So let's go back a little bit to your earlier days at Calix. When
Yep.
you first joined the company, what were your initial impressions, and what strategic vision did you have in mind to drive this transformation?
Well, my first impression was, wow, we have a lot to get done, right? We were not a profit-making company at the time, and we were in an industry in significant flux. But we had a clear vision, and that vision, was established before I joined. But, if you went back 7, 8 years ago, that's where that vision really started to become a reality. And the first one is that we wanted to enable a completely different operating model for a broadband service provider, right? So you saw companies, if you went back 10 years ago, like Amazon and Google, who were doing incredible things with data at scale to drive a better operating model and new business models. And so we said, look, we have to bring that same ideas and those same practices to our industry, which is a data-rich industry, data through the networks in the home. But how do you liberate it and democratize it so that you can go to a relatively small company who doesn't have the means of Amazon and Google and give them the tools to use that data to improve their operational efficiency, improve their marketing, improve their customer support and engagement. So the first point was we had a very clear vision that said everything we do is driven towards the goal of democratizing data and helping our customers use the techniques of a Google or an Amazon or a Facebook, but to drive a better, more operationally effective broadband service provider. The second thing is we had a very, very clear vision that we were going to try and help our customers transform from a dumb pipe to a full service value add service provider. So if you went to any of our engagements or events 10 years ago, there was this whole debate, should we go inside the home, right? Like, hey, we're very happy delivering broadband to the side of the home, and then someone else can really worry about the experience. And our vision was that we were going to really help the service provider think about how they go in the home effectively and efficiently, but also start to bring value to that experience, right? And the Wi-Fi, the managed Wi-Fi, security of the connection, et cetera. And what could we do on top of that? And we said, look, that's the second big, vision that we had was we want to enable that transition. And then the third thing when I got to Calix was a very clear point of view from Carl Russo, who was our CEO at the time, from Michael, who ran, operations at the time, the current role that I have. It was very, very clear that we wanted to focus on finding prospects and customers who were strategically aligned, right? Let's not go try to convince the entire world that this was what they should be focused on, but let's find people who share our vision and enable them to be successful. And if we can get those early adopters to be successful, we can always go back to the laggards later and try and convince them with the evidence from the successful, right? And that was an important part of our strategy, which is don't go to every single one of our customers and prospects and try and sell them on this new vision. Find those that are strategically aligned and help them succeed. And over the next, 5 to 10 years, the rest will come. Make sense?
Absolutely. That's very interesting. Maybe you can expand on how did you identify those early adopters? What process did you use? Or was there like a one-on-one interview, or how did you go about
Well,
identifying those
the
customers?
primary sensing instruments was our sales team, right? So how do we arm them to go ask the right questions and dig in with a customer to understand their strategy and see their receptivity? But the second thing we did, which was the first mission I was given when I joined Calix, was build a world-class marketing organization so we could engage at scale, right? So how do we have a compelling series of webinars where we can invite folks and those who kind of find this interesting come? How can we do, really account-based marketing, and how do we drive nurture engagements via email? How do we create a digital experience that draws people in who are like-minded and kind of brings them to the table? How do we do the same in social? So to your point, you definitely want to go and have the one-on-one conversations, but if you wanted to scale, you have to have that as part of your go-to-market, which is an important, sensing and engagement engine so that you can go beyond the small number of accounts that your sellers can really go probe. And if you design that journey properly, your marketing funnel is bringing people in and bringing them along. And when they're ready to have that conversation, you're bringing in the right sales and success and solution engineering resources to ask the questions that will tell you if they're strategically aligned.
Absolutely. That's very insightful. You talked about the vision. You talked about, where you were, where you wanted to go. Whenever you embark on a transformational project, regardless of the size, there's always challenges.
Mm-hmm.
You want to keep your lights on. You want to keep your current ways of doing things,
Yeah.
so that your customers there's no outage or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
So from going from a hardware company to a software company, it's a major pivot. What challenges you and the leadership team face, and how did you overcome them?
Well, I think that the first challenge that I would point to is that going from a company like we did, which was and transforming that into a new company is actually harder than doing a startup. And the first thing you have to do is bring your customers along. And you need to make sure that as you're flying that plane, which is we have an existing business that we're doing, which was very different than the business we have now. If you look at our platform and the systems architecture and the managed services and software, but we had a large, $500 million hardware business. So what it requires is, first, you have to sort of explain not only what you want to do to your customers, but why, right? We have a vision for your future success, and we need you to partner and trust us. And then you do certain things like, look, our legacy products, we've supported those products for 10, 15, 20 years, right? Which you compare that to some tech companies where they'll launch a product and decide a year and a half later, well, it's not successful. We're going to end of life that. And the people who bought it are going, hey, wait a second, right? So we kind of had a contract, if you will, with our customers that said, when you look at where we want to go, we're going to continue. Those of you who want to stay in the old model, right, which is being more of the quote dumb pipe, using hardware, selling speeds and feeds, and you want to be on our legacy monolithic products, great. We're going to keep those alive for as long as humanly possible, and we're going to support you. And then back to my last comment, when you're ready to come with us on this journey, we'll bring you there, right? And
Right.
So those were the kinds of things we did that allowed us to successfully fly the plane while we're building the new one, right? And it was really, really hard, but we did it. The second thing is, there was a challenge around the way we developed products, right? We used the sort of, the old waterfall development process, and, you come up with a set of requirements and you go for 12 to 18 months and you come out with a new product.
Right.
And we completely flipped our innovation cycle to what we call our agile innovation method, which is very much a, Scrum model, develop an MVP, put it in market, get early adopters, and then build the product out. And we put that process on a formal quarterly cadence, right? Which, by the way, was a massive transformation. But then more importantly, we basically aligned the rest of the company on that cadence. So we were not just innovating the products, but we were innovating in marketing and sales enablement and our commercial offerings and all of that. That was a really tremendously important part of what we did. And then I'd say the last challenge is, how do you convince people they're skeptical? I mean, our industry, it's a pretty conservative group, right? Very operationally focused. And I think if you went back and looked at our go-to-market strategy for the last 7 years, the thing that really stands out is that basically our marketing and our selling is like a reference model, like, on whatever you want to call it, steroids, right? And the whole point was we had to really focus on finding the early adopters. And then everything we do, right? If you go to our big conference, the whole conference is about, hey, you should do Calix Smart Home. By the way, here's somebody who's been tremendously successful. You should do Smart Biz. Well, here's someone who's been, and our press releases, everything, we don't actually communicate anything about us or our solutions that doesn't start with, here's a peer of yours who's been successful, so that we could overcome that conservative nature of our customers. That was that third really big challenge. So it was all about, one, how do you keep customers believing that your plane's not going to drop out of the sky? That's already up there. Two, how do you transform innovation to align your org? And then again, really the last one is your go-to-market set up to convince, people to look at the early adopters so that the laggards come along in a way that, feels comfortable to them, right?
Yeah, it's absolutely phenomenal that your team was able to engage the customers in the process early on, so that their feedback and their vision and their requirements could be incorporated into the transformation that you were embarking on. Let me talk a little bit about the leadership. And I had the pleasure of working with Michael in my previous life. And he is such a phenomenal, charismatic leader. Having him at the helm obviously would have helped because he inspires everybody around him. Maybe talk a little bit about the leadership dynamics.
Sure.
How did you collaborate, and how did you get everyone's buy-in into this new vision?
Sure. So the first thing is we had to reskill the company in terms of, keep the people who are here who see the vision and want to do it, but then we have to go out and, quite frankly, hire a lot of people. And if you look at our leadership team, many of them were hired in that period of 7-8 years ago, where Carl and the board said, we've got to bring, people with software and cloud experience into the company in the different functions. And, Michael was a really key add there. And, I'll talk just about the leadership culture and what I think is unique, and then I'll comment about how I think, Michael puts his unique twist on it. So the first thing is Calix is an incredibly collaborative organization, right? Almost to the point of, discomfort, right? And the point is there isn't an important decision that we make that isn't made collaboratively. So on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly basis, every decision we make, so every week we meet as a leadership team plus, members of our teams to go through a new product idea. And we all provide our input. Now, Shana Laniak, who is our chief product officer, they ultimately have to make the decision to build it and go build it. But we all have the opportunity to shape the decision. Same thing is we're evaluating a deal with a customer. We bring that into something we call our business opportunity review every week. Every quarter, our new marketing campaigns get reviewed with everyone, and they can comment on everything from the name of a new product down to the messaging to what we prioritize. So I think the company has really built a system of collaboration at scale. And again, if you're somebody who likes to be able to go to your silo and do your thing and then talk every once in a while, it's uncomfortable, frankly. But if you want to move fast and you want to move fast in a way that everyone's aligned, you have to adopt that, what I would call, collaboration at scale. And you have to design your systems to force that collaboration and support it. Now, the interesting thing about Michael is that what he brought to this process, where I think are two things. The first is a view of radical transparency, right? So we use Chatter for our, internal social communications, and the company, we use it probably more thoroughly than any company I've ever seen, right? And the whole idea is let's put this out there so that people can really see what's going on. In fact, my first leadership team meeting when I joined, Michael had the decision that we were going to basically broadcast that to, the whole company, right? Which, coming from some of the companies I came from, I was like, wow, really? Right? And the second thing is a concept that, there needs to be an environment that encourages and supports dynamic tension, right?
Right.
We have to have an honest debate, and we have to be comfortable challenging and debating each other. And it's this sense of, it's almost like an obligation of, if I disagree with something that you're saying that's important, I have to challenge you. We have to debate it, right? And it's not a personal thing. It's how we live the ethos of, Michael's phrase is better, better, never best, right? And the way we can get there quickly is by helping each other getting better, challenging ideas, asking questions. And so those are two elements of our collaboration environment that I think are really important enablers. One is that sort of absolute transparency. And the other one is this idea that, look, we're going to have the dynamic challenge and make sure that we're debating these things thoroughly so that, at the end of the day, we're not all sitting there making a decision that someone thinks is suboptimal and it gets swept under the carpet, which I think can happen at a lot of companies.
Right. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the way you guys operate. I mean, virtual sort of remote working was always there.
Yes.
For the last number of years, but it was never at a scale as we saw during the pandemic, during COVID-19. But you guys started on this journey way back that everybody else got on. So maybe talk a little bit about how this collaboration happens when everybody is virtual and, and it's really fast paced. So maybe talk a little bit about those dynamics.
Well, so first I'll say, from my own experience, when I was at IBM, back in the early 2000s, it was one of the first well-known companies that started to enable working from home, right? And during my 12 years there, I worked in all parts of the business, hardware, software, services, et cetera. And each had its own culture. Like when I was in the software business, it was like 5 days a week in the office, right? Then I was in global business services, and, as a leadership team, we'd get together once a quarter because we were off, right? And what I learned was, there's no right or wrong answer. If you have the right culture and the right processes, in the office every day to remote 98% of the time can work, but you have to be purposeful about it, right? And what I noticed about Calix was that we had a real commitment to making it work. What does it mean? Every new employee, you get a monitor, you get a great speaker, you get a great video camera, you get a stand-up desk, right? There's this technological enablement that makes it easy so you don't have people, on their laptop in their kitchen trying to collaborate. The second thing is you have to set cultural norms. And I'll give you a great example. You get on some, virtual calls on Zoom or Teams or whatever technology you're using, and 3/4 of the people don't have their video on. So you can't see their facial expressions, you can't react, right? And I remember, Michael has said this, Carl Russo has said this. If you were in a meeting, you wouldn't go and put a bag over your head. So why would you turn your video off, right?
Exactly.
Like this is no different, right? And so there's a set of what I would call technological enablements, cultural enablements that you have to do. Another example, right? I've been at companies where if you were remote and there were 9 people in the room, you basically were up on the screen behind there, completely ignored, right? It was, right? Do you create a meeting environment that is inclusive of people, whether they're in the conference room or they're on Zoom? And the point is, if you do that, you can be 95 to 98% as productive in most roles as you can be in the office every day. You just have to recognize what you need to do to make that successful. And I think Calix has been very successful at that. Now, I say 95 to 98. There's always going to be certain things where you want to be together, right? Particularly if you got a team full of extroverts. On the other hand, there's other things you gain back, right? I had employees who I was in the office every day, and they had an hour commute. And then, of course, it would snow, and their hour commute turned into 2 hours each way. And I would be like, okay, don't tell anyone, but, stay home tomorrow. And they'd be like, oh, bless you, thank you. Hey, you lose 4 hours, right? So I think there's a lot of advantages. And the last point is, I would say, if you embrace it and you embrace the technology, it does wonders for your company. Like, here's an example. I have people who work for me that are all over the North America, into Europe and other markets. And, frankly, I don't have to worry, can I get the right talent in a highly competitive Silicon Valley? I can go and hire people, in Waterloo, right?
Right.
I can go hire people in Vermont, where I'm living right now. So you suddenly go and you have that pool. But here's the other thing that's really powerful. So the woman who runs demand gen for Calix, who I've known for a long time, she and her partner are big sailors. And they like to split their time between Bermuda, Nova Scotia, and for a while they were even in Lake Tahoe. And I didn't know where that person, where she was.
Yeah.
And I didn't care because she was committed and she did her job. And the point is, the
Yeah.
fact that we extended that trust
Right.
actually created a tighter bond between the company and the person, because I'm saying, look, I trust you. You know what? You want to live your life certain months here and there? Fine.
Yeah.
I trust you to do your job. And it actually creates a much higher level of commitment. That's what I found. You have to hire, right? You can't hire someone who's like, such an extreme extrovert that I can't function if I'm not in a room with 5 other people solving a problem. But I
Right.
think the environment, if you do it right and you hire the right people, comes with some really big inherent advantages. And you can manage the downsides if you're thoughtful about it. And the last comment is then you have to be thoughtful about getting people together on a regular basis, right? Hey, we're going to have team meetings. We're going to have leadership team meetings. We're going to have, problem solving sessions. You have to plan those things and be very planful about it, because if you don't ever get together, that's also not a good thing.
Absolutely. I think you said it right. It's all about transparency, and it's all about establishing that trust. And if the work's getting done, then why would you care, right?
Yeah, but why would you care, right? And I hear these stories of companies where they're putting like things under the desk to see where, when people are in and out of the office, or they're putting software that tracks, what are you doing on your computer during business hours? And it blows me away, because if you make the commitment to work in this environment, those things are silly, right?
Right.
And if you are thoughtful in hiring and enabling your team and getting them culturally aligned, those problems that some people see go away, right? So, there's a lot of advantages as well as some challenges.
I agree. Let's go back to your customers, the broadband service providers. Let's talk a little bit about how the transformation that happened at Calix, in terms of going from a hardware company to a software company. How has this impacted, and how do you actually measure the success of this transformation with your customers?
Sure. So there's a couple of core business metrics, and then there's one that we focus on that I'll get to, incredibly big focus. So the first thing is there's two elements to what we empower our customers with. So the first is our platform. So these are the systems and cloud solutions that help you run the operations of the business, right? Your call center, your field techs, your core network operations, your marketing, as well as the underlying systems that enable the access network from your data center out to the community, and then when you're in the community into the home, right? So we provide that platform, and by cloud and software enabling it, the way we want to measure success is through sort of more traditional operating efficiency. So let me give you an example. Our customers, one of their biggest operating expenses, truck rolls, right? Like someone has a problem, it's either with a network element that's out in the community, in a cabinet, or in a home. That costs hundreds of dollars, right? And the way they used to operate in our industry, our customers, is whenever there was a problem, they would roll a truck and, write a $200, $250 check, right? Now, with this cloud technology, you can diagnose issues, you can solve them remotely. Like I like to say that, with our service cloud for in the home, you can do everything that a tech could do with one of our gateways other than plug it in, right? You can change a channel, you can change a node, band a node, you can, reboot the system, you can update the software, and you don't have to send a technician there. And as customers adopt our platform, we've seen things like truck rolls drop 75, 80%, right? Mean time to repair drop 75 to 80% because you have the data when you show up and have to show up. And I could go on and on, but those operational metrics that matter are critically important. The second thing is we provide them with managed services. What are those? Those are the things that you offer on top of your core broadband and Wi-Fi managed service. So things like, network security that works on the gateway and protects you from everything in the home. Things like content control and device control, so that you can say to someone, look, when it's 11 p.m., you can have your kids' devices disabled. Social media monitoring to detect when your children are getting cyberbullying, connected camera solutions like Arlo. And I can go on and on. And by the way, those stretch into small business integrated solutions, community solutions, right, where you can wire up a ball field in your community and extend that to your subscribers. The point is those things drive ARPU and take rate and all of those. And so our successful customers have incredible operating and revenue results. But the most important thing is the net promoter score, right? So if you're familiar with NPS,
Yeah.
yeah,
Absolutely.
our industry on average is one of the worst in the world of any industry. If you go look at industry surveys, in fact, our average for this broadband industry is actually negative. That means the average service provider has more detractors who will say bad things about them than promoters who will say good things, or certainly neutral, right? And there are people in our industry, players who you've heard of, who have -10, -20, like really, their customers are not happy. Our customers, many of them have net promoter scores of 50, 60, 70, even 90, right? Because they're using this technology to not just provide a great service, but to make themselves more relevant to the lives of their subscribers. And people are saying, it's not just the pipe that brings broadband that breaks every once in a while. Look at all the great things they're doing to protect me and my family and make my work from home experience better and all of that. And so when I look at, how do we help them succeed? The most important driver is, are your current customers so excited that they're going to go out and promote you? Because that means they're going to keep your service, even if someone comes with a lower price, but also it's going to help you drive growth, right? So that's how we think about enabling our customers to be successful. Incredibly efficient operations, really compelling services to drive ARPU and take rate and all of that. But ultimately, you put those two things together and it drives, incredibly high net promoter scores.
Wonderful. Let's talk for a moment a little bit about the future in terms of the vision. Everybody's talking about AI and emerging trends. So, maybe talk a little bit about what's on the roadmap going forward.
Sure. So I'll start with technology, and I think AI is a key one. Look, we look at everything we're doing today with our customers, and there's a role for machine learning and AI, right? And we've already got, machine learning in the systems. I mean, I talked about, the ability to, do all those fixes in the home, with connected devices, and that'll happen automatically thanks to machine learning, right? And you can do predictive maintenance in the system, right? So that's already there, and it's going to happen more and more, and it's going to be enabled with new ways of delivering those capabilities, directly in the chips we use versus just on top of the software that you have to bring back to the cloud and process, and you can do it locally and, add that with things like, deep packet inspection. And, suddenly there's a whole new world of what you could do with the telemetry data and the performance data across the network. But AI also promises to completely transform the interactions with your subscribers. So an example is enabling through AI for someone to a chatbot, right? Instead of calling support, and more quickly getting to resolution. So it drives satisfaction. And obviously it's much, much more efficient for the service provider. You can extend that to, things like, hey, if you use AI, it's a great way to enable things like self-install, right? Like, hey, I don't have to roll out and go and install everything with a subscriber. I can do an upgrade from a Wi-Fi 6 to a Wi-Fi 7 system, and they can do it themselves. And Imran, the interesting thing is we found that for many customers, when you enable something like self-install, it drives their satisfaction up immensely. Why? You don't have to sit there for 4 hours waiting for someone to show up, but it also, you get invested in the solution and you get to understand it, it. And AI will absolutely enable that, right? I think another big transformation is sort of the economics of the industry. Really great broadband has existed in very dense urban areas for a long time. Getting it outside into the exurbs and the rural areas and some of the poor communities is a big challenge. That's why there's so much focus on closing the digital divide. And in markets like Canada, there are billions of dollars that are being made available for this. In the United States, it's tens of billions of dollars, right? And there's lots of private dollars flowing into the industry. And so I think that transforms the economics of who you can serve with what technology. But I think equally importantly, it changes the competitive dynamics if we do it right. What do I mean? There are lots of emerging service providers, like some of our regional customers, who have a very different focus and value prop than some of the, largest service providers, and they offer a different value prop. And I'm not saying one's terrible and one's good, but with these investments, we can encourage more innovation and more competition at the service provider level so that the end subscriber benefits from lots of viable options in their market versus one or maybe two, right? So it can really, really stir up competition, right? And then I think the last trend is the one we've talked a bit about, right? Which is there's going to be consolidation in our industry, right? Today, it's quite fragmented. And the winners are going to be those who understand the value of not just operational efficiency, but a value prop that includes, great service and great managed services. So, we always talk about it. Don't just be the dumb pipe, right? We were really aggressive starting 7, 8 years ago to say, look, if part of your value proposition isn't doing things that your customers can touch and feel and identify with, and everything in the home or in a business is from Google or Amazon or some big brand, as a service provider, you're going to go the way of the dodo, right? So as we see this consolidation, I think you're going to see winners more and more focusing on being experienced service providers, not being utilities. So those three trends will all play together to create what I think will be a very different industry landscape in 5 and 10 years.
Absolutely. Well, thanks so much for sharing those practical use cases. Lastly, Matt, for those aspiring to lead and drive change within their organization, especially in the tech industry, what advice would you give based on your experiences and lessons learned at Calix?
Well, the first one is don't be afraid to be bold, right? Don't be afraid to put a vision out there that is both enticing but also challenging. To give you an example, back in 2017, Michael and I were really focused on kind of how do we shake things up a bit. And we went straight at, people like, firms like Google and Amazon and telling our customers, like, they're not your friends. They want to turn you into a dumb pipe. They want you to be the one who, when there's a problem, they call and go, hey, my Wi-Fi is not working, right? But on the other hand, the chat app that they use and the gateway they use and all the devices they use, all the stuff that people go, oh, this is really valuable. They want that to be Google and Amazon and Facebook and others. And so the point is, if you want to drive a transformation, don't be afraid to be bold and go, hey, these people who we all think are these benign players, they're actually not your friend, right? That's an example of something that we did. My other piece of advice would be, don't be afraid to fail, right? We have had a lot of success at Calix, right? We've gone from $450 million to over $1 billion in revenue. Our gross margins have gone from the low 30s to the mid 50s. Our market cap has gone up, dramatically. So all the things you would look at to go, wow, these guys are really succeeding. We had a lot of failures, right? If you go back and you look at our original systems in our platform portfolio, we made a lot of mistakes, right? And we had to iterate and, bring out new systems. If you look at our managed services, example is, when we launched our Calix Smart Home and Business solution, which became Calix Smart Home, one of the first things we did was to say, we're going to enable a white label IoT solution on it, right? So, you can go pick what devices you want. And then we quickly learned, wow, that's way more complicated than your average service provider wants to take on. We ended that service 8 months later, right? We just went and quietly said, okay, that's going away, right? And I could go on and on pointing to that because, maybe it sounds trite, but you learn a lot when you fail, right? So as long as you're learning as you fail, don't be afraid, right? People like to say, celebrate failure. Okay, maybe that's a little bit hard, but don't punish it, right? Accept that it's going to happen if you're going to be trying new things.
As they say, if you're going to fail fast and
fail fast, for sure. Don't be afraid of that. The other thing, and the last thing I'll mention is, really focus on explaining why, right? Explaining why, not what we want our customers to do or what we want our employees to do, but the explaining why. And one of the interesting things that has evolved in Calix over the last, 5-6 years is this notion of we are a B2B2C company. That is, the consumer consumes our service, but the way we get there is through the broadband businesses, and we have to enable that model. And the point is, if you really want to understand what's happening in your market, you have to understand what's happening with the end customer, in this case, the subscriber, as well as your customer, and why is it happening? So the example would be, we're really focused on like, hey, you have to have, persona-based offerings and you have to have value-based offerings. The reason is if you look at what happened during the pandemic, people actually started to define themselves with how they're using broadband. If you went back 6 years ago, it's just like, hey, I got a good service. I'm getting, 500 meg. Now it's like, hey, I work from home. I'm a gamer. I'm a streamer. I'm a connected business. I'm a parent of a connected household, and I have kids who do these things. And so if you look at kind of how people are living that life, it helps you understand why you need to do the things you need to do yourself and with your customers. And so it's really, really, my advice would be important to just, if you're doing something new like this, it's really important to understand why and constantly explain it to yourselves and your team and all of that.
Absolutely. Well, Matt, we're coming up on our time, and I just can't thank you enough for joining us today and sharing such a wealth of knowledge and personal experiences from your journey with Calix, your insights into the transformational process, leadership, and the vision for the future, not just thought-provoking, but incredibly inspiring for anyone looking to make an impact in the tech world. And of course, to our listeners, we hope you found this conversation as enlightening as we did. Remember, the path to innovation is not a sprint, but a marathon, with each step paving the way for the next step. Keep pushing the boundaries, stay curious. Until next time, keep growing and keep tuning into Behind the Growth for more conversations with our movers and shakers shaping our tomorrow. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Behind the Growth. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow along on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. This podcast is brought to you by Mobile Live, a team of digital experts bringing intelligence and efficiency to how businesses sell, serve, and save. For more episodes of Behind the Growth, please visit mobilelive.ca/podcast.